Hello, everyone. This is the Metaphysical MGTOW Griffin Red. And I like to give a special shout out to GW3X, Tito, the Brant Watkins channel, Mad Bus Driver, and all of the MGTOW, SYSBM, IPMOR brothers out there. The name of this video will be called The White Racist Manchild. And I want to put this disclaimer out there. I know that I have subscribers that happen to be white, and this video is aimed towards those who have bigoted, racist mindsets. So if it don't apply, let it fly. I shouldn't have to say this, but I like to put the disclaimer out there anyway, because, you still have some people that are just stupidly slow. So now that we've gotten that out the way, I actually been meaning to do this video for quite a while, and it was due to this jackass white nationalist who calls himself Jared Taylor. I see that he goes around arguing with these emotional black commentators about the superiority, about the inherent intelligence of so-called white people, and things of that nature. And I noticed something. I noticed that Jared Taylor does not really go after some real black intellectuals. I would love to see him debate a real black intellectual, not a Tariq Nasheed, and not this other black guy that he went up against or whatever. Not somebody that's overly emotional. I would have loved to see him go up against somebody like maybe Thomas Sowell, or hell, even Colin Powell. I don't think he's that stupid, because he know both of them would have mopped the floor with his ass. But anyway, I found some articles online, and I'll be sharing them with you, and you can feel free to read them and everything like that. I'll put the links in them in the description box of this video. And I had to ask myself, these white nationalists who want to make the U.S. a white ethno-state, as they've been trying to do for the last 400 years or whatever. And you have to ask yourself, what is the so-called white race? I asked myself that. And from what I've read in history and things of that nature, it's a classification. It's not really a race. And if you look up the whole purpose of the creation of these racial classifications, because they needed justification to enslave and mistreat other people based on cosmetic differences, like skin color, hair texture, facial features. Look it up. That is the only purpose of race. That is the original reason why they created these racial classifications. Now, I found some comments that that were left on the internet, and people who were who have left comments and left their opinion and everything. And I'm going to read some of them right now. And the first one is, I'm just going to go through all of them. It says, I've always noticed that a lot of white people who flock to Richard Spencer's banner already live in counties and towns that are virtually 99% white. Vast swaths of heartland America is littered with entire communities where the white resident would have to drive several hundred miles before they found a brown face. In short, they already have their own virtual white ethno-state. The problem? Their ethno-state town or county is what we call Podunk, USA. No jobs, no growth, no tech. One step away from poverty everywhere you look. But gosh, look at all that beautiful country. Thing is, the capitalist free market economy doesn't care how beautiful the countryside is around that all-white town. The old mine is played out. The mountain has been reduced to a slag pit. The lumber company is long gone to Brazil. The old Singer factory is a heap of rust. The old automobile plant ain't nothing but a decrepit field behind several miles of chain link fence. The federal government and liberals did not do this. The free market and Wall Street exercised their financial decision to leave them behind. Simply put, those wonderful white towns of deep red states were no longer useful to the captains of industry. But they're still 99% white. What Richard Spencer and his folks really want is to walk into San Francisco or Seattle or New York City, pick any major metropolitan area, the ones where all the big corporations are, where the economic booms of the 21st century are taking place. They want to walk into a major city and surrounding suburbs and declare that their white ethno state. They want a place where only white people can get great jobs and earn big fat paychecks. Thing is, nothing prevents them from coming into any metropolitan area, getting an apartment and competing for those jobs. They just have to accept the fact that if they don't have better qualifications than the Black American applicant or the Arab American applicant or the Indian American applicant or the Asian American applicant or the more qualified fellow white American applicant, they won't get the job. Being white is no longer a sufficient qualification for a good paying job in the 21st century. Being white and not as qualified in an imagined white ethno state means that corporations won't be bothered to locate there because the unspoken basis of Richard Spencer's idea of a white ethno state is the notion that white is sufficient qualification because white is superior. They don't want to compete. They want corporate jobs with big fat paychecks handed to them simply on the basis of them being white. And that world, the whole world over, has been gone since 1970. What is someone like Richard Spencer? What does he mean when he says white? Really, think about it. What is a white American? Ordinary, decent folks of all races, have a general basic idea. It's true. But for the people promoting this idea, you need to ask, what is their concept of white? Let's just say that as a Black American, non-Blacks would be surprised at what we hear when the speakers don't think they need to worry about my reaction. We're the fly on the wall to a lot of ugly truths that speakers will vehemently deny in more polite company. There have been times when I hired a limo to get somewhere and the driver, a white guy, would start going off about those damn Jews. Then there was another time when a white New Yorker would go off about the damn Russians. To me, both sets are white. Or I have another friend in Boston who would be in a board meeting and one of those old ancient Anglo-Saxon scions will let out a slur about someone of Irish descent who thinks he or she is getting over their betters. Yes, folks, that old class prejudice against the Irish is still alive and kicking in a lot of well-heeled closets. And there's still whites of German descent who sneer at the whites of Italian descent. And Hispanics are quite aware that they aren't really white in the eyes of a white American. That should be a wake-up call to the Hispanics who like to kiss white ass, the Hispanic white supremacists. And let's not forget about the ones who look down their noses at other whites, as they would say, of a certain stock who come from the Appalachian Mountains. American whiteness is not as unitary as they like to believe it is. Now bring into the mix the notion of a creation of a white ethno state. Who determines who is white? Who gets to define what is white? And let's not forget that now we have the wonders of genetic science and gene testing. Who gets to determine what percentage of your genetic heritage defines how white you really are? So-called white nationalists are overlooking the fundamental ugly core problem with the fantasy of a white ethno state: racism. A white ethno state is fundamentally an exercise in racism. Racism is not defined as animus between blacks and whites. Racism is far more flexible and has the ability to be infinitely discerning. It always slices thinner and thinner. Racists are obsessed with mythical purity. There will always be someone who is not as pure to a racist. And since ultimately racists would be the governing powers inside an ethno state and white ethno state, all sorts of rules and regulations that would make Hitler smile deep down under will start being applied to everyone's grief in this fantastical utopia. In the end, just like Nazi Germany, a number of those ethno-state citizens will end up spending most of their time worrying if and when the jackboots will come for them, because somebody decided that they weren't really white enough. We already have past examples. South Africa was one. Anybody remember Rhodesia? And for those people who quickly quip about Japan or China, I would like to remind them about all the Asian sub-minorities inside those principalities. Those countries are only monolithic and culturally uniform to the ignorant white racist Westerner who really gets off on a plane and walks to the hotel and back. A white ethno-state will be incredibly boring and worse at worst, and a disaster ending in flames at worst. The reason ethno-states like Hungary, Norway, and Korea, especially the homogeneous North, work is because they are united by a single culture. See, everyone else's answers for the details. The problem with white culture is that it does not exist, because there is no universal culture shared by all white people. German culture exists, Romanian culture exists, but white culture is a complete fiction. How do you like that, Michael Savage? So if you want to make a white ethno-state work, you would have to make all the white people in said state adopt a single culture. In theory, you would have to choose one culture and make everyone assimilate into that culture. Like how America made everyone act like white Anglo-Saxon Protestants before World War II. But what usually ends up happening is that any and all culture is stomped out in the favor of conformity to a single state ideology, like what Mao did during the Cultural Revolution and what neoliberal America is doing today. Eventually, you have a state full of completely boring and uninteresting and basic white people without any real culture, and the light to defend white culture is lost because there is no culture left to defend. And actually, no, you still won, because you really wanted, because all you really wanted was suburbs free of Negroes. It would fail and fail hard. Why? Because humans are just itching for any excuse to go all us versus them. Any reason. Religion, check. Ethnicity, check. Family ties, check. Political affiliation, check. Favorite hockey team, check. Boxers versus briefs, check. iPhone versus Android, check. Toilet paper versus toilet paper under. Any reason. All of these things and more have caused endless strife amongst humans. As long as a group can coalesce against someone else, they can set aside differences, however large or minute, that could divide them. Once the threat has been neutralized, all of these things can rear their ugly head and easily fracture seemingly cohesive groups. Why? Because we are animals after all. There is always going to be another them. I like to see what ethnic groups will form part of this white ethno-state utopia. I'd also like to see how long it would take for the infighting to start. Me personally, I say at max, the most it would take is 3 months for the infighting to start. And if you want to get technical, most of you pro-black victimology Negroes, you should know this. There's a lot of infighting in between these racist white groups. Go look it up. You have some that actually hate each other. They are not as united as you think they are. Go read Lord of the Flies. I know it's fiction, except for the fact that it's not. It's pretty obvious that this comes from a United States perspective. So I'm coming at it from an angle. Thanks to its origin as a slave economy, the United States has spent a lot of time and effort coming up with spurious intellectual reasons to justify treating blacks like shit. They were economically and educationally expressed, which fed a self-serving narrative that they are stupid, lazy, criminal, and amazingly virile, with enormous appendages that threaten white masculinity. Actually, blacks commit crimes at the same rate as white Americans in their socio-economic strata. It's just that they've been kept in certain economic strata for centuries of concerted effort. Nevertheless, it's only natural that some simple, nasty people want simple, nasty solutions to perceived notions facing their perceived problems facing their countries. It appears to our basic primate nature. if we just get rid of those nasty blacks and Mexicans, then everything would be nice and non-threatening. Of course, there is no actual biological marker for black or white. So any set of parameters you set for defining black or white will be janky and easily refuted with edge cases. But let's say you use them to spell everyone you don't like to look up and set up your own state. So now you have a white ethno state. Yippee skippy. Yippee-ki-yay, kumbaya. Hooray, you have some white pride days. You have a great time talking about how nice it is without all those ethnics stinking up the place. But then you start to notice your neighbors talk slightly different from you. You go to that church down the road where they sing those hymns that are kind of weird. And there was that burglar that came in your house from the next town over. They're like all criminals that way. Plus, they are taking over the sovereign ethno-state, Senate, and introducing revised definitions of whiteness that threaten to disenfranchise you or members of your family. You plant some homemade explosives at their shopping mall to send a warning and load up on guns and ammo to execute a preemptive strike because they're plotting against you. The thing is, there have been functionally white ethno-states in history. And you know what? If your instinct is to blame and dehumanize some other group, you will find a way to do so. In lily white Victorian Britain, scientists proved that the Irish and the poor were morally and genetically inferior and should be wiped out, for example. Or in former Yugoslavia and Northern Ireland, religious ethnic divisions tore apart very white states in vicious civil wars. Whites or blacks or Muslims or Catholics or Protestants or Serbs or Croats or capitalists or socialists do not make countries shitty. Only shitty people who want to persecute and mistreat anyone different from themselves can do that. A white ethno-state would be nasty as hell because it would be built on a foundation of nastiness. You will face the perennial question, how white is white enough? Before thinking about any further practicalities, I suggest you consider this question seriously, since it is the foundation of the proposed state. How will you define whiteness? Present skin color? Ancestry? How will you evaluate ancestry? How far back do you have to go? What is going to be the criterion for your eventual one-drop rule? Figure this part out first. Plenty of dark-haired, dark-eyed Nazis killed plenty of blonde-haired, blue-eyed Poles. Irish people, who many would call white, were long known as the niggers of Europe. It appears that being white was not enough. So what is going to be enough? I'll make a prediction. Any such white ethno-state will still have color gradients within it. Look at the actual European history. In addition to the preceding anecdotes, there's going to be discrimination within any society who can be the whitest. And once everyone in the country is white enough, then you're going to discover something interesting. Now that you're all white, being white is no longer a distinguishing factor in any way. Now you'll have to figure out what you're actually good at doing aside from being white. So there you go. Those were comments left by pretty intelligent white people. Now, I'm going to read to you an article from a former white nationalist, and he talks about, I'm just going to read some paragraphs. I'm going to leave the entire article in the in the description box of this video, and you can read them yourself or whatever. And this is a video, an article done by former white supremacist Christian Picciolini, Italian. If the Italians now only knew how they were treated 100 years ago, they will call everything that they used to stereotype us was applied to them. They were called niggers and darkies and dagos and wops and things of that nature. Okay. And he says, the rhetoric that I'm hearing today in our society is very similar to the rhetoric that I used to say 30 years ago that was part of our white supremacist neo-Nazi movement. Everything from the words invasion to the idea that people are going to replace whites. Those are ideas I used to spout when I was a neo-Nazi in the 80s and 90s. It really is just identifying vulnerable people and then amplifying their passions and trying to fill those voids in their life. Because I've never met a happy white supremacist, he says, and I've never met one with positive self-esteem. So I'm going to go and he also says, but he's not making excuses for them. I still hold people accountable in many of the same ways that I've held myself accountable for 23 years. Now I'm going to get on and speak on Mr. Jared Taylor. I noticed when he debated Tariq Nasheed and this other black, I think this guy is like a TV show host or like an internet show host or whatever. And I guess these people really couldn't come back at Jared Taylor with any real facts, even though they could. They really could if they did their homework or whatever. And I noticed that you see the smirking and the grinning and the pompous arrogance of jackass Jared Taylor, and you have to ask yourself, what is the purpose of going around, pushing this rhetoric out there that you're somehow smarter because of your fucking skin color? And he really gets off on that. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I really believe Jared Taylor has very low self-esteem. Think about it. He's a baby boomer, and a lot of these people that still hold these racist ideologies or whatnot, I noticed that they're from the baby boomer generation, or they're like Generation X. Me personally, I was born in 1980, so I was born in the last year of Generation X. But a lot of these guys that quote and use this white nationalism and everything like that, I noticed a lot of them are baby boomers or fucking losers in life. It's really strange. It's really strange. And here's another article. It says 10 ways white supremacy wounds white people. It says, I'm just going to read a few of them. I'm going to leave the article in the description box. It says, the first one is teaching white children from an early age to disconnect from people of color, distance ourselves, understands ourselves as better than, thereby distorting and putting out of reach real human connection with most of humanity. Growing up in rural, predominantly white northern Pennsylvania, my parents would take me and my brother on trips to New York and Philadelphia. On the way, they would always prep us on how dangerous those cities were and ingrained in me an association between cities, black and brown people, and crime. Number 2, learning to admire colonizers, rapists, slave owners, misogynists, liars, thieves, and those who committed acts of genocide became history is only taught from the perspective of white supremacy, which portrays those acts as not only defensible, but as necessary evils. William Penn was ingrained in my mind as sort of some benevolent colonizer with tales of his fairness to the Lenape people, his refusal to have an army, his religious tolerance, etc. I didn't even know he was a slave owner until adulthood. Number 3, living on this land with no connection or understanding of the land we are on or knowledge of the indigenous peoples it was stolen from. The house I grew up in on the corner was a relatively busy street in my little town. I always felt more like a Hollywood movie set than an actual place in the world. Arbitrary, fabricated, and divorced from the landscape. And no one ever talked about the Pacific tribes whose land we were on, not once. Refusing to acknowledge America's original sin of racial chattel slavery and genocide, and refusal to understand reparations as a spiritual and material necessity for addressing those traumas. When I was a teenager, I asked my dad if anyone in our family ever owned slaves, and he gave me a sad and defensive look and said that he didn't think so. As an adult, I've come to understand that this was a misguided question. My ancestors didn't have to be slave holders in order to benefit from the enslavement of African people. Forcing people of European descent to erase our culture in order to conform to whiteness and white dominant culture. Both sides of my family have been in the United States since before the American Revolution. and I have zero tangible connection to the cultures and customs of my ancestors. The flip side, this was being raised in a white middle class American family that had no understanding of itself as having a culture at all. So I'm going to let you guys read the other five. And, could you come to it, and, you come to your own conclusions or whatever. And I'm going to read one more of these articles, and, you guys can read it for yourself. I'm just going to go ahead and go and see. All right. It says the Vikings were never the purebred master race that white supremacists like to portray. It says the word Viking entered the modern English language in 1807, at a time when growing nationalism and empire building. In the decades that follow, enduring stereotypes about Vikings developed, as such as wearing horn helmets and belonging to a society where only men wielded high status. During the 19th century, Vikings were praised as prototypes and ancestral figures for European colonists. The idea took root from a Germanic master race fed by crude scientific theories and nurtured by Nazi ideology in the 1930s. These theories have long been debunked, although the notion of ethnic purity of Vikings still seems to still have popular appeal and is embraced by white supremacists. While the modern word Viking came to light in an area of nationalism, the 9th century, when Viking raids ranged beyond the boundaries of modern Europe was different. The modern nation states of Denmark, Norway, Sweden were still undergoing formation. Local and familiar identity were more prized than national allegiances. The terms used to describe Vikings by contemporaries, Weissing, Russ, Magi, Genti, Pagani, Pirati, tend to be non-ethnic. When a term akin to the Danes, Danar, is first used in English, it appears as a political label and mix of people under Viking control. The mobility of Vikings led to a fusion of cultures within their ranks, and their trade routes would extend from Canada to Afghanistan. A striking feature of early Viking success was their ability to embrace and adapt from a wide range of cultures, whether that be Christian Irish in the West or the Muslims in the East. Developments in archaeology in recent decades have highlighted how people and goods could move over wider distances in the early Middle Ages than we have tended to think. In the 8th century, the Baltic was a place for Scandinavians, Frisians, Slavs, and Arabic merchants were in frequent contact. It's too simplistic to think of early Viking raids, too, as hit-and-run affairs with ships coming directly from Scandinavia and immediately rushing home again. Written accounts survive from Britain and Ireland condemning or seeking to prevent people from joining the Vikings. And they show Viking warbands were not ethnically exclusive. How do you like that, David Duke, Jared Taylor, and fucking Michael Savage? As with later pirate groups, for example, the early modern Pirates of the Caribbean, Viking crews would frequently lose members and pick up new recruits as they travel, combining dissident elements from different backgrounds and cultures. The culture and ethnic diversity of the Viking Age is highlighted by finds and furnished graves and silver hoards from the 9th and 10th centuries. In Britain and Ireland, only a small percentage of goods handled by Vikings were Scandinavian in origin. All right. And I'm going to go down here and read a little more. It says, similarly, Vikings in the 9th and 10th centuries may be better defined more about what they did than by their place of origin or DNA. By dropping the simplistic equation of Scandinavian with Viking, we may better understand that what the early Viking Age was about and how Vikings reshaped the foundations of medieval Europe by adapting to different cultures rather than trying to segregate them. It could be argued that these markers of identity were more about the status and affiliation to long-range trading networks than ethnic symbols. A lot of social display and identity is not ethnic in character. One might compare this to the contemporary international business culture, which has adopted English language and the latest computing technologies, common layouts for boardrooms, and the dining of Western suits. This is a culture expressed in every nearly country of the world, but independent of ethnic identity. So I'm going to let you guys read the rest of this article. I'm going to leave it in the description box or whatever. And I'm going to close with this. You guys, I know we talk about how Umar Johnson, Sarah Sootin-Seti, and all these other pro-black fraudsters, because that's just what the fuck they are, that they're government agents and race hustlers, which you are right. But I came to the conclusion that jackasses like Jared Taylor, David Duke, and Michael Savage, I believe that they are race hustlers as well, and I believe that they're government agents. I believe that they're government snitches. They may try to come off as saying, oh, well, we just want to have the right to be around our own people. You already do that. You already do that. Think about it. Most people that hold these white racist ideologies, they only mess with they only mess with other white people. And we really don't bother them. Pretty much. So it makes you wonder, what the hell do y'all really want? I'll tell you what it is. They're afraid that they're losing that buffer class status. That's what this is really about. They're pissed off that slowly everything is starting to be equal. Slowly starting to be equal, and they're being left behind. And then what pisses me off even more is you have bootlicking ass nigger shines who make apologies and actually agree with these motherfuckers. You have black YouTubers that will actually sit up and say that, this is America, and white businesses have the right to exclude blacks and all these other different races. That's and that's natural. That's they have the right to do that. This is America. You can do what you want here in America. Yes, these are bootlicking shine ass niggas that say stupid shit like that. And I'll be doing a video going off on them, especially this asshole by the name of Jesse Lee Peterson. I got something for his ass. And I'm going to share something with y'all that this dumb motherfucker said. And lastly, I want to say this. The white nationalist and the white racist, he's not even a threat. Yes, he has his guns and everything like that, but you were able to buy guns as well now. So he's not really a threat as long as he doesn't harm you. And to be honest with you, they should be, at this point in time, the white racist, and the white nationalists should be an object of ridicule and mockery, and should be ignored, and should be treated as the man children that they really are. Because what this is really about is they're pissed off that they're losing that preferential treatment simply based on the color of their fucking skin, and they cannot deal with that. It's really tearing up these older generation so-called racist whites or whatever, that things are actually becoming equal. So this is why you have all these racist cops and all these abusing their power and everything, because they're afraid. They're scared. They're terrified. That terrifies them. A society where it's truly equal, they cannot fathom that. They want to go back to the old ways, and the bootlicking ass shines that agree with them, they want to go back to that old way too. I say fuck them too. So this is my video of the white racist man child, and that's just what they are. The white racist is just a child, and he should be ignored and laughed at when the time comes. Thank you, and stay tuned for more.